I've never been more affirmed of how strong kids are. Like I feel like in all of the chaos, in all of the darkness, and all of the everyone losing their freaking minds over all these, like the ones that are actually suffering. I mean, they're handling it like champs, man.
Welcome to the We Are Human podcast, the podcast that dives deep into the lives of those who work in healthcare but do not let healthcare define them.
Every episode, we bring on those in healthcare to share their stories, their struggles, their pitfalls, their successes, everything that makes them human, both inside and outside of the hospital.
Because while medicine is a big part of who we are, it is not all of who we are. Welcome to the We Are Human podcast. Well, Tyler, you survived the pediatric ICU.
We did it. We're here. We're still here.
Oh my gosh. You literally just got through one of the hardest months of pediatric residency, and you are now on camera filming our podcast.
Yeah, I think there's a little bit of hair left. We'll see. I mean, it'll go soon too. We definitely
have more than I have.
Well, we'll get there. I'll be back there 2 more times this year, so maybe by the end of it, we'll see how much we've got left.
Yeah, well, I am so excited to dive into this episode and talk about the pediatric ICU. But before we get too ahead of ourselves, I am Tommy Martin. I'm a combined internal medicine and pediatric attending, and I am one of the co-hosts of We Are Human.
And I am Tyler Beauchamp, the other co-host of We Are Human. I am a pediatric resident and children's and young adult author.
Tyler, I am thrilled about this episode because for me, I don't know if you knew this, but I initially wanted to go into either combined med peds hemonc or combined med peds critical care. And so I'm just excited to hear about your experience in the pediatric ICU.
I didn't know that about you, man. I mean, I can totally see it, but that's wild.
Yeah, I think the high energy, the long hours, the lots of coffee, all of those things kind of lend to my personality. So I think it would have been a good fit.
I was going to say every day felt like a marathon. So you probably would be like good training for it anyway.
Yeah, so for our listeners, I'm going to be asking Tyler some questions, and he's really going to be sharing his thoughts about the pediatric ICU. So the first question that I wanted to ask you, Tyler, is if you had to describe the pediatric ICU in 3 emojis, what would those 3 emojis be?
Okay. The first one that comes to mind is the smiley emoji that's melting into itself. Like the one that's kind of like drifting.
Yeah.
The one where the brain part is exploding. And then the one that's just like a straight line with the eyes like
scared. Like, yeah, stupid.
Like, yeah.
That's perfect. I love that. I love that. Would you say like from the start of your rotation to the end of the rotation, those emojis changed at all? Like at the beginning, were they just all like headlights, or how did they change throughout the rotation?
So, this is my very first block of not being an intern. And I definitely felt like it was the first block of being an intern because, we don't have, at least where I do it, we don't have PICU our first year. So there's a new thing for second years. And it was absolutely the definition of we're going to throw you in and learn as you go. Like, the day before because we also shift blocks midweek to help out that not everyone is like changing on Sundays. So like the Monday, the day before, I was in clinic, and then Tuesday morning, here you go. You are in the PICU,
Wow, that is a drastic contrast.
Like, it could not be any more different. But I would say that the emoji changes through the entire time. Is the first day was just the head explosion, like all, and maybe the first 5 days. Then I would say the melting kind of came, and then maybe by the end it was more, okay, I'm okay with the chaos. Am I? We'll see. Like it's more of the direct line.
Could you let our listeners know what the pediatric ICU is? Just so I know not everybody's in medicine, so just kind of give them a bird's eye view of what the PICU is.
Yeah. Great question. So the PICU, or pediatric ICU, is the intensive care unit for pediatric patients. And what that means is that anyone as young as when you are born until you are 18 years old, for the most part, like if you are in a critical condition that is too sick for the hospital itself, Um, that's where you go to be managed by a very, very large team. The things that can bring you there, I mean, there's so many things that can bring someone to an ICU over just being in we call it the floor or the regular hospital. And you think about like the things that put you on a ventilator, the things that are from trauma related, from multidisciplinary. So like kids that have like many problems with many parts of their body that in itself is just too much to be managed on a floor. And I mean, the list goes on and on. And I would say the acuity, like you think about if you go to the emergency room, a lot of times, I'd say most times when you go to the emergency room as a kid, you need to go to the hospital, you probably aren't going to the ICU. Most things that need to go from the emergency room to the floor can be managed by our wonderful hospitalists that take care of a host of problems. I would say the sickest of the sickest, or those that are the ones that we need the most eyes on, because things can go from 0 to 100 the fastest. Those sick patients go to the ICU.
Yeah, I think that's a perfect explanation. And I'm kind of in a unique position, Tyler. I work in a step down from the ICU. And so, depending on the size of your hospital, you'll have a general pediatric floor. And then some hospitals, if they're large enough, will have a step down or an intermediate unit. And that's where kids are pretty sick. They're too sick for the floor, but not sick enough for the ICU. And they go there. And then you have kids that are too sick for the intermediate care unit, and then they go to the ICU. And every hospital is different. Every hospital has their own protocols, and every hospital has their own comfort levels of what they handle, where they are. And so if we have any parents listening, some of the most common things, especially in the winter months, would be bronchiolitis or asthma. And so generally speaking, if you aren't needing too much oxygen, you'll be on the floor. If you start needing a device where they have a mask on their face, such as CPAP or BiPAP, you might be in the intermediate care unit. And if you're getting to really high levels of that and need potentially escalation of support, then you go to the ICU. So a whole range of things, a whole range of possibilities. And then hospitals even have cardiac ICUs. They have neuro ICUs, depending on the size of the hospital. So there could be a lot of different ones. Now, Tyler, were you in just a general pediatric ICU, not a specialized ICU?
Yes. Yeah. Generalized.
I know that it could be intense, as it is called, the intensive care unit. And so is there anything about your experience that surprised yourself?
You know, Tommy, a joke that we have in my residency class is that I'm kind of the black cat or the black cloud.
Oh gosh.
You know, every class has that. So I think a lot throughout intern year, I would have experiences like when I was in the NICU. Afterwards, the attendings fellows had said like, it's never been like this before, or and then we'd go to the floor and we'd have some things that people like, I've never seen anything like this. And to an extent, you know, it's hyperbolic, and that's what residency is for. You're there to learn together and see things. And so to an extent, I am like very grateful to be able to be a part of those experiences, because like you learn how to, if you see that stuff all the time, every day, and then you definitely become better at managing the more bread and butter. I would say that this PICU month was not your bread and butter PICU month, if PICU could ever be considered bread and butter. Like Tommy, I did not have in the course of a month, I did not have one DKA patient. I did not have one bronchiolitis that is now over 2 per kilo, like too much for the floor. Now they need to go to the PICU for, like, I didn't have the things when I'm like prepping in my mind. Okay, how do I handle these things that are always seen in the PICU? Like I didn't have one of them.
Yeah. Like all the things that you studied for before your rotation.
Yeah.
And then, like none of them show up.
None of them. Not one. So when they said after this, like, it's not usually like this, I believe them, because like all the things that they usually see weren't there.
Oh my goodness. Yeah, that can make it even more challenging than I'd say that it typically is. And so if you do not know what a black cloud is, and unfortunately it seems like Tyler has been deemed that, a black cloud is pretty much someone that once you are on service with them, you know you're going to have the hardest week on service. Like you're going to have the most patients. You're going to have the sickest patients. You're going to have, the most rare cases that nobody knows what's going on. I personally do not believe in clouds, but it seems like Tyler's real life experience would go against my disbelief.
I don't like really believe in them either. I just, that's like, like, so, and maybe that's, and this is part of what I want to talk about today is that I feel like my normal has completely changed. And maybe it's because of, and not even like my normal has changed for everything else in life itself, but that if you do see the zebras so often, and if you do see the things that people would say is a black cloud, um, that does become your baseline. And so, what I think from the PICU standpoint is like after a week of black cloud energy and zebra energy, the next week became that's your normal. The third week became we're not surprised by this, and by the fourth, you're like, oh, this is okay. I mean, and this is my first PICU experience. So when people are saying that it's not usually like this, I'm like, well, to me, it is.
Yeah, I think everybody's norm changes as you get more accustomed to things. And so with that, Tyler, what PICU can be hard. It can be mentally, emotionally draining. Um, how would you say that your, I guess, just ability to cope had changed throughout this rotation, or maybe your ability to endure, just your emotional fortitude throughout this?
Yeah, you know, I wish I could say that I handle things in a healthy way. I wish I could say that I found healthy coping mechanisms and that I felt like really proud of what I was doing, but I also found the ways that I needed to be. So I guess I'll say this first. I feel like a lot of our episodes, Tommy, we we talk about really wonderful, happy things, and that we bring on people and share these like wonderful things outside of medicine. But in the title itself, we want to share the pitfalls too. Um, and I will say that this was definitely a pitfall month for me. Like I honestly, between the things that were happening in the hospital, between the things that were happening, unfortunately, outside the hospital, both from like a creative space, from a personal space, like it did get to the point where almost daily there was a huge blow. And for coping as well, I talk about making it my normal that it wasn't like I'm looking for the silver lining, so to speak, but it was that I'm doing what I need in the moment to focus on the patient that needs me. And I think it speaks volumes to those that do this long term on like how they compartmentalize, because there's certain things that I can't like unsee. There's certain moments that I just, now that I have time, I'm like remembering them. I mean, they're Tommy, they're in these last 3 days alone that I've been outside of the PICU. I've had so many people, attendings, residents, people who heard about stories in the PICU, and they would come up to me or text me like, "Hey, I heard about what happened, and I have to clarify to which are you referring to?" And they hadn't known of the others. So I think with time, I'll have a better understanding of maybe how I was coping, but I definitely learned how to compartmentalize in a way that I haven't before.
Yeah, no, I can understand that completely. I had some extremely hard moments in the pediatric ICU, and it's insane, right? Like you're dealing with potential life-threatening illness and maybe even death and dying, say at 6 p.m., and then you're home at 6:30 and you have a kid, my son at home laughing and playing and wanting to go down slides, and it's like the ability or like how to manage that, and so I could definitely understand that completely. This might be too personal, but do you mind sharing to what extent you're able to, like, your darkest time in the PICU?
Yeah. Unfortunately, we did have a lot of demise this month. And that's not necessarily a new experience to me. I mean, in residency and in medicine, like, you are around that often. But it was definitely the most that I've seen in such a short time span. And partly is because in the summer, for everyone listening, like I would say that your ICU for kids in the summer tends to be, I would say, a little more traumatic in the sense that there's a lot of more trauma, capital T related injuries. You think about kids like they're outside of school, so they're, in the summer, they're at pools, they're doing vacations, like they're, you know, so because of the time span, you will see things that where kids are very, very healthy in one moment, and then they come in because of a very acute, unfortunate change. And I would say that there was a span of going from nights to days where in the nights it was, I mean, I remember having like, I'm trying to handle 3 admissions, um, while my fellow is handling putting someone on ECMO, while
Oh
my
my goodness.
attending is handling an error like transfer, like managing the entire unit. And so I'm trying to like get these admissions in, and they basically are like calling out to me like, hey, like just manage, like triage. You know this by now. You've got this. You need to get these 3 services in no matter what, but just do what you can. We'll come in a second. And I'll say a funny story from it that in the light of the darkness, I, for a trauma related patient coming in, I knew in my head, okay, I need to get neurosurgery involved. I need to get pediatric surgery involved. And specifically, I need to get trauma in. And then I know from another condition they had, I need to get endo in. And I'm paging all the people. I'm trying to put in orders. I'm getting the history. I'm getting the story from EMT and transfer. And on our pager system, the only trauma name or the only word for trauma that's on all of the pagers, I page, and it's the trauma attending, and it's 2 a.m. And by our means, we are definitely supposed to page the resident, like pediatric surgery resident, and then they will go and page the trauma attending. I didn't know that. Now I know. Um, and
Oh
so
no.
while I'm like furiously putting in things, and I've got 2 phones to my head, Tommy, I like one of them is like, uh, who is this? Like, what's going on? I was like, hi, are you trauma? Like, I need you to come in. Like, we've got this case, and they're like, I don't think you're paging the right person. It ended up being
To
fine. Yeah. But it was definitely like the don't page you're attending at 2 a.m. And I just saw the word trauma, page trauma.
Yeah, so all I have to say is you're lucky to be in pediatric medicine. If you would have been like, I don't know, in adult medicine or a subspecialty surgical service, I don't know if the person on the other side of that call would have been too kind.
I will say they were definitely not happy with me.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, they were definitely not happy with me, but we smoothed it out afterwards. But in the moment, they were pretty upset.
Oh my goodness. You know, having 3 admissions come to the ICU in general, you know, around the same time, that alone is hard. Let alone dealing with all the other things with the fellow being busy, the attending doing something. Like that's just a lot. That's a lot to handle.
Yeah, it was, but it became kind of routine. And I would say in that time of those ends of nights and days, like that's also when we had the highest rate of our unfortunate outcomes. Um, and like one in particular to kind of voice out was like, as we're handling things, I remember I'm trying to handle one patient that certainly needs acute attention, and my fellow is handling another patient that needs acute attention. And my fellow like calls me physically from across the hall because he can't leave the room to call a family to say, can you call a family to get in right now? Um, and for me, like I had never even, this wasn't even one of the patients that I was following. So this was like, you have to call a family that you don't have familiarity
You
with.
don't know.
And
Yeah.
so, you know, to expand from that, there were a lot of moments like that and certainly worse, but like that was kind of the sense for a bit.
That's so challenging. And I think you touch on something that's really important is as hard as this is, as hard as medicine is for us, you know, I'm sure you were working close to 80 hours a week in the PICU, seeing a lot of hard things. But there's a other side of it, and that's that there are families, loved ones on the other side of the hardness, right? On the as hard as it may be for us, it is exponentially harder for the families that are going through this. How would you say interacting with families and the relationships with families maybe changed your perspective of medicine or changed your relationship with patients' families?
Yeah, I definitely think for the patients that I followed the longest, the ones that were there the longest, I mean, like some of them, I think they're going to come establish with me as like PCP in our clinic. Like it was, we are trauma bond is real,
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
but to go off of that, Tommy, one particular family story moment for someone I'd been following who, unfortunately didn't make it. And their family was huge, just so many people. And you can only have so many people physically in the PICU at a certain time just by regulation. So I remember like when I have to, let the family know what happened, and I had to do it in like stages. So it's like, okay, here's 5 people from the family, and I have to and go through it. And then here's the next 5 people from the family, and do it again and again and again and again for like the next couple hours. And you to each one of these groups of 5, this is the first time they're hearing about it. This is the most life-changing thing you can hear. And I'm, as the physician, and I'm trying to do my best to treat it as such. But certainly by like the 7th time I'm walking them through what had happened and letting the family know, like I'm really feeling it, Tommy. I'm like, so I'm not okay, but I have to be okay because it's not about me. And then like I would love after all of that to have the time to just like embrace what happened. But you don't have that luxury. You don't have that time because it's still, I mean, that was before lunch. So you have to, you still got 8 hours left on your shift, and you got a lot of other families that need you.
You said something that I just want to touch on. You said that it was extremely hard and that you weren't okay, but you have to be okay. What role do you think being vulnerable with your own feelings and with your own hurt and with your own hardship as you're dealing with these, what role do you think that plays in patient care? Like, do you feel like it's okay to show emotion? Do you feel like it's okay to cry? Do you feel like it's not okay? What are your thoughts about that, and how do you handle that?
I think it's still, I think I'm still trying to come up with answers to that, Tommy, if I'm being totally honest. And it's certainly family to family dependent. Like the families that I really knew and then had to give those really, really unfortunate updates for, I feel like I could be more of Tyler and less of Dr. Beauchamp. But of course, the families that you don't know, like, it would be, I don't know. They don't need that from a stranger. That's when they need the stranger to be the strong one. And so I may know their child from a long time, but if I'm meeting these people, like in that example, like I hadn't met any of them except for 2 or 3. So to them, they're meeting me for the first time, and I'm doing this. Like it would be disingenuous for me to just be like familial with them. But for the families that know me and over the time course and the things that we went through, and then we've established that trust, that's when I felt more comfortable even in the way that I talk to them and disclose things. Like I know the way that they want information to be given. And so for some of those families, they want just be real with me. And cut off the medicine talk and tell me how it is. And I even had one family after all of this ask me how I was doing. And that's like never, I know. And it was just the most beautiful, gracious thing. Like, and it wasn't even like a family that was acutely sick. Like they just saw everything that was going on. And then when I went to go update them, they like were like, "Are you good?" And so one of the things, I'm sure my face did not look good. So it probably was like not like, too hard.
Are you okay?
Yeah, it was probably like not too hard for them to see like, oh, this guy,
yeah.
Good.
So that was actually one of the most moving moments for me in residency. Was we were just having a lot of really sick patients, and there's a family that their kid was very sick and had been very sick for a long time. And I'm sure that they could see the emotional toll that it was taking on me. And I was like comforting them. And then at the end of it, they got done and they said, "Well, Dr. Martin, are you okay? Like you need to take care of yourself as well." And it's crazy, but no one had asked me that.
Yeah.
None of my colleagues, not the attendings, not anybody I was working with, not my family members. Which a lot of my family members didn't know the intensities that I was going through. But then for this family, when their child is suffering, to still have the compassion and the empathy to ask me how I was feeling, it literally broke me. Like I literally just started crying with them. And I was like, I am okay, but that was the sweetest thing that has happened to me this month. And just the fact that you care enough to make sure I'm doing okay as well means so much to me. Yeah, so I can relate to that completely. You know, one of the quotes, have you ever read When Breath Becomes Air?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. So I've read it, I think, 4 or 5 times. So to our listeners, whether you're medical or not medical, I would highly recommend reading this book called When Breath Becomes Air. I'm not going to even tell you any of the details about it. You just need to read it. But one of my favorite quotes in it is, the only unrealistic optimism is the only alternative to crushing despair. And I feel like that has been like my mantra throughout life in general, but especially during hard rotations like the PICU, or for me, I'm med peds, the medical ICU. How do you feel about that quote, and did it play any part into you surviving the PICU?
Yeah, Tommy, I wish I could say I was totally proud of the way I was compartmentalizing. And I mean, there were many a moment where like people would come in to see how I was doing because they knew like, oh, we've all started our new year, and like some people started on an elective, or they started on like a vacation, or they started on um like a clinic month or something. So they'd come in just to see. And like there were many a people who saw me in my behavior, and not that I was just going around being a jerk, but like they're like, "Oh man, this is not Tyler." And I got told that enough to be like, "Wow, you know what? This isn't Tyler." And I don't know if it's necessarily a bad thing for the month, because I think I did need to, like, I can't go into the PICU with the energy I had before, because um that's not what the patients needed of me. So it was this weird balance of, I'm going to be probably one of the more optimistic people, but I have to cut it with more realism than maybe I'm used to. And the I do like the way that they talk about optimism in that book, um and being unrealistic, because it it almost felt disingenuous, Tommy, of when I was trying to be optimistic, and I felt like I was doing it more to keep the morale up in our group than anything else. And I think people knew that too, but they were okay with it. In the very brief moments that you get to debrief things, and I would say that the most important thing for anyone getting ready for an ICU month or a PICU month or anything like this, is that it all comes down to your co-residents. I mean, it really does. And thankfully for me, I got very lucky with the co-residents I was with, because we had actually been the same trio that had done the NICU together.
Oh, that's so great. So helpful.
And so we also, not just for like understanding each other, but having a system down. So like during rounds, like anticipating what people needed and their weaknesses and their strengths, like that. Oh man, that was huge. But also, since we already had that built-in relationship, and it's been a year as well, like we knew how to take care of each other for sign out. We knew how to take care of each other afterwards, like venting. And I honestly, Tommy, if I didn't have the other residents that I had, like the way that I had them, I probably wouldn't even be doing this podcast episode right now, because I would be in such a horrible place.
Mm. And so, Tyler, I don't know if you'll feel comfortable sharing this, but you mentioned multiple times that you're not necessarily proud of like how you coped with the hurt and the hardship and kind of the strain of the PICU rotation. Do you mind to share more depth about that? What you mean by that?
Yeah. I remember one moment in particular. I mean, the PICU fellows that we have are just some of the most wonderful people that we have in the hospital. And I remember one night, after we lost a patient, and it was a very acute change. So it was not something we were anticipating at all for the night. Um, the fellow, who's one of just like a sweetest man ever, he kind of comes up to me and goes, "So, like, by the by, I know I'm talking about our other orders right now. I'm talking about our other admits. Um, have you ever lost anyone before?" And I'm like, "I have." And he goes, "In that kind of way?" And I was like, "Not that kind of way." And he goes, "Well, I'm gonna be straight with you. I'm probably gonna be a little bit cold, not to you, not to anyone, but like flat for the next couple hours, because we've got a lot of bad things coming in right now. And we there's a lot of other kids that I don't want what just happened to happen to them. And I promise you, after all this is said and done, I'm probably going to bawl my eyes out on the car ride home. And I encourage you to do the same. But we're going to lock in right now and we'll accept this later. And I did appreciate kind of just like the acknowledgement of what we were doing. Cause I feel like for the most part in medicine, we kind of understand when bad things happen that everyone's compartmentalizing. But the quickest of check-ins to be like, has this happened? Like, where's your reference? Has this happened to you before? It has. Okay. So I can at least like mentally know what block you're in. And then to express like, I'm going to be human later. I did think about our podcast a lot during this month, like the whole "we are human." I felt like there were many times where I had to kind of pause the human side of Tyler, because if I let it all come in of truly how I was feeling, it was going to be harmful to the patients that needed me. And that's not an unfamiliar thing for me in medicine, Tommy. Like I've been in ICU before, I've been in the NICU, but even in the NICU, it can be such slower paced and there's moments for that. And here it was just that you really didn't have time to debrief and take it all in until you got home. And then you're only home for a very brief time to sleep before you come back in. So that's where I would say, as far as like, I'm not too proud of how I'm handled. I think right now, as it's ending, it's almost like things are coming back to me from over the month, like things that I compartmentalized. So I think a lot of your answers to this are going to come with time, but I'm not entirely proud of how in an ideal world, if I had the time to address the things that I wanted to, I would have loved to. But the thing I'm not proud of is that I had to just force things down.
First, I want to say that fellow, I think, is incredible. And that's exactly how a senior resident or a fellow should approach things, and really lay things out for one that's going to see where you're at, but then prepare you for what's about to come. Something that I might push back on a little bit is that even in those moments where there are 10 fires in the unit and you're literally, this machine on autopilot going through, I think even being able to show glimpses of humanity in the darkest moments, in your busiest moments with the patients and their families, provides so much power, realness, and vulnerability, that there's still space for it. And even if it's a 5-second, conversation or a 20-second moment, where time kind of stops and you allow your humanity to show, and you allow your patients and their families to feel that closeness, I think can be so powerful and so important. But one thing I will say is that every person is different, and every person's ability to hurt and cope with that hurt is different. And I think that is something that you really learn during these PICU rotations.
I couldn't agree more, Tommy. And honestly, something I started doing that's just along those lines. And I think if I'm going to take anything absolutely positive from this month of just like complete darkness, is that the times where I felt like I was the most not okay, the times where I felt like I'm about to break, like I can't go one more minute, but I need to go one more hour, I would take the extra time to go into family rooms and talk with them, even if I already like updated them for the day and like I got a million notes I need to do, whatever that stuff. I would just go in, see how they're doing, talk for a second, laugh, joke, like be that Tyler, even if like really inside I'm not okay. Because I personally, selfishly, I just needed a reminder of what this is for. And so I will say, like, yeah, you're absolutely right. I didn't necessarily just like stay cold all the time, but I did feel like when I was not in a patient room, for the most part, I stayed cold. And then when I'm like, okay, I need a reminder. I need a reminder of what all this is for. I would go back into a patient room that I just to see the family, just to see like one in particular. I remember I went in after I had lost somebody to a different room, and I just like walked through. I was like, hey, raise your hand. I walked in and just go, raise your hand if you are confused as hell at what is going on right now to your child, to this whole system. And like the whole family like raised their hand. And I was like, yeah, all right, let's wrap. Let's talk. I want you to rapid fire. I'm looking at mom. I'm like, Mom, you look like you've got like a pad of questions ready to go. And she's like,
Yeah.
oh, like I'm so
Oh,
confused.
I do.
Yeah. And Tommy, I probably spent like 30 minutes in there. And then of course, like, in the back end, after you've done sign out, it's like, okay, I'll do the 30 minutes of what I need to do later. But I tell you, man, by the end of that, and like seeing their faces feel a little more reassured, and like being able to be with the patient I had also been kind of bonding with, and um, I needed that. I think they needed it, but I honestly, man, I feel like I needed it more than
You
they
needed
did.
it more. Yeah. No. So something that I think is very counterintuitive, but I truly believe is one of the antidotes for our suffering and our hardship through these hard rotation is sharing in the suffering of what our patients and their families are going through. And I believe by being that ear, by being that crying shoulder, or even being there to cry with our patients, that heals little darkness within our hearts that have been hardened from the hardships that we've seen. And I think the reason that is because we see the humanity in it. We allow our hearts to hurt. We allow our hearts to cry. We allow our self to let go and be vulnerable. And I think if you allow your heart to just be darkened and you do not allow it to soften through being vulnerable with our patients, it's very hard to heal a concrete heart. And so if you allow your heart to soften and share in these sufferings with your patients at the bedside, I think there's a lot of power and healing in that. I know that some of my darkest moments have been relieved and healed by, instead of walking away from a patient room that I was afraid to go into because I was afraid of how much it would hurt my heart, walking in anyway and sitting down and holding the hand of the families and allowing them to express their hurt and allowing them to cry and allowing them to scream, and just being there, and then also sharing in what I was feeling, instead of that producing more hurt and more suffering. I truly believe that it provided so much healing, not only for the patient and their family, but also for my heart.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more, man. And I think for everybody listening, to put a not a bow on what the PICU is, but kind of a broad understanding picture of the feeling, the vibe. Um, Kids are really, really healthy until when they're not. And so like part of what's beautiful about pediatric medicine is that it is this perfect divide of preventative care, making sure these horrible things do not happen. And then when the horrible things do happen, like they need urgent, immediate need now. And so it does feel like everything you do in pediatrics has substantial, impactful energy. And not to throw shade on the big M of the med peds over here for adult. I think part of what brought me to peds over other adult care is that I felt like sometimes the actions we were doing, it's just like you're doing a little bit of good, but it makes something a little bit worse, and there's a lot of pushing things around. And that's just not where I got my energy from for medicine. I felt like in peds, literally every sentence we say, every moment we have, like I could see the impact. And in the PICU, you think about an adult ICU, that is its own set of struggles that like I certainly couldn't do, partially because like I feel not I don't want to say the futility, but like there's a lot that goes through there that's like I'm gonna really try to protect this organ at the sacrifice of another, and I'm gonna manage that later. In the PICU, all these kids for the most part that were like suddenly coming in, they were fine last week. So like you get a new list of patients, you come in, and for you it's like, okay, one of the worst CPS things I've ever seen. The next room, like this kid that was just like having a good time at a park fell 20 feet on his head. Another kid that for whatever reason is comatose, and we're trying to figure out, but like it's all like things that the week before they weren't even a thought in the mind of these families. And that's kind of what the PICU, especially during the summer, comes about. And so it is a good reminder of one perspective, like being in this entire month, that really appreciating what life is, and how fast it can change, but reminding yourself that as much as what you're feeling, like you said, Tommy, these families are feeling it more than you can ever like ever understand. And I do be I am vulnerable with those families. And the thing I'm trying to work on is, like, when I leave the room, the balance between not taking everything that was in that room out and bringing it on to the next family, because that's not fair to them. But also for me, I do need to work through what I just went through. And when you don't have the time for that, that dynamic, Tommy, is what I'm talking about. That dynamic of I need to be slightly colder than I want to be, so I'm not bringing their problems onto a family that has their own set of problems. But sometimes it does feel like, and more often than not, at the sacrifice of my own.
Yeah, and I'll say, not bringing that coldness not only onto the next patient, but also not to your colleagues, not to the nursing staff, not to everyone else. And so, I think one thing that could be beneficial, and like you said, in the PICU could be extremely hard to do, but is just taking 2 minutes, and whether you have a nurse that you're close with or a resident, and say, look, I just had a really hard patient encounter. And I need to decompress to you for 2 minutes before I go see my next patient. Will you allow me to do that? You don't have to say anything back. Just let me share with you my feelings, and go, and then, go on to the next thing. And so, Tyler, we've talked about a lot of heavy things, and the PICU can be very heavy. But I want to transition to maybe some lighter stuff. But in doing so, I'm going to ask you a couple questions. So in the PICU, you're there forever. What is your favorite snack in the PICU that you probably ate when you had 2 seconds to eat?
Okay, so this might be a loaded question, and I feel like somehow maybe my team got in contact with you. Maybe they didn't.
No, they didn't.
No, so all of my co-residents know when Tyler is stressed, he is a very bad eater. Like, he doesn't eat. And literally in the NICU at times, because again, it was never like this. It's the worst it's ever been. So I was like trying to manage stuff. I literally had a senior like baby feed me as I had, like, I remember this moment, Tommy. I had two phones. I had a phone from a consult from like an outside hospital, like crazy coordinated care. But I have two phones to my ear. I am calling. I am trying to put in orders at the same time, and I will never forget one of my residents physically stabbing food with a fork and putting it in front of my mouth. And like,
Oh my gosh.
so this month in the PICU, they were like, we have this amazing restaurant that is in the hospital. Like, I do know people, Tommy, that have taken first dates to this place in the hospital.
That's insane.
And
that's the most resident thing I've ever heard.
Yeah, bold move, Cotton. We'll see how it plays out for him. But it is amazing. It's like this Mediterranean style. I promised them, like, I would eat when I would handle a certain thing. And I remember I would get this like amazing med food snack, and I brought it in. And Tommy, I'm eating this thing, and I look over my co-resident who's like on the phone with the consult, and they go, and then my attending looks over and goes, and then the med student goes, he's like, from like behind the computer, his head goes like, and I'm like, have like a fork to my mouth, and they just start clapping.
Like, Tyler is eating.
They're like, yes.
Oh my. That is hysterical. I'm the complete opposite. When I am stressed, I am like a stress eater. So like, I'll eat anything and everything in sight. But so my favorite hospital snack would be graham crackers and peanut butter, and then a diet ginger ale. Because that's what our hospital has. That's what I love. So okay, fantastic. And then another question that I had for you: if your crew that you were with, you and your residents, were a band, what would have your band name been?
It's okay. I have to maybe steal this from a med school band that we had back in when I was in med school. But I thought they had like the coolest name ever. And I like brought it in as a joke into our team. We've actually had this exact talk. And so I was like, guys, we should be called either like failure to thrive or failure to dive. Like failure, like so I was like, all right, we're failure to jive.
Oh man. All right. And then one more before I get to some more serious questions. What was more intimidating on your first couple days in the PICU? A toddler that was like just having the worst time and throwing the worst tantrum, or your PICU attending?
Oh man. Oh, she's gonna love this when she hears this. No. So like, and she's totally okay with this, but my program director is also a PICU attending.
Okay.
So like I had her for a brief, like when she was on as far, and she's hysterical, but it was funny because I'd never worked with her as an attending before. And I do remember at a time when we got her and we had a toddler that was just like throwing hell in the other room. And we look at each other and I'm like trying to handle it, and she's being an absolute angel. So I would say definitely the toddler was like the struggle. And then oh my god, I can't say this. I can't say this next part. I can't do this next part. But I'm just gonna answer your question, Tommy. Toddler for sure. Toddler for sure.
Toddler for sure. Oh my goodness. So I think medicine is changing some for good ways. But so when I was a medical student, there was this PICU attending that was the scariest attending. Okay. Like everyone warned you about going to the PICU. Everybody warned you about being on rotations with them. And I would say I'm a pretty confident person. And I was just like, it's not going to be that bad. And I'm also unrealistically optimistic no matter what. And I'm like, it's not going to be that bad. So I go to the rotation, jack down my face to be in the PICU. It's actually my sub-I, and go up to the attending as I'm about to present my 4 patients or whatever. And on the very first one, I do my entire presentation, and this was on an infant. And I thought I crushed the presentation, to say that out loud. Maybe I'm overconfident. But the attending said, so did you auscultate the fontanelle? Like I just presented the entire thing, the assessment and plan. The only thing she says is, did you auscultate the fontanelle on exam? I was like, excuse me? She's like, yeah, did you auscultate the baby's fontanelle? I was like, no, I've never done that in my life. And she said, you're the most incompetent medical student I've ever worked with. Do not present to me again unless you've auscultated an open fontanelle. I'm like, oh my gosh.
What the hell?
What in the world? Like, I've never even heard of that.
Dude. Okay, I'll say this. Like, I definitely did not have those experiences. Like, the PICU attendings were not at all like that. They're all like the best people ever. I did though, Tommy, quick tangent. I did have some of those experiences with other attendings of other services because it is, hey everybody, it's July in the hospital. It is a time of wonderful stress, and some people handle it better than others. And there were some moments where attendings would come in from other services coming up to me blazing with fury. Like one in particular came in and was like, when we were sending to the floor, because we had handled hypertension, and they were just like, how could we send this to the floor? Like, this is totally like wild. They need to be PICU status. You need to move these beds around, all this stuff. Like, they're like, I need you to do this. And I kind of stop them and go, like, I'm a resident, right? Like, I don't get to make that call. So I was going to pause real quick to make sure I'm the resident. And maybe
you're more than welcome to vent to me, but I have zero power.
Go off. Like, I'm listening. Like, go off. But at the end of the day, if you want to save that energy for someone who can do something about it, I'm just letting you know before you keep going.
Oh my gosh, that is so funny. Well, to follow up on my story, I will say that even though I had that encounter with the PICU attending, I would have chose the PICU attending being scarier after that moment. But that PICU attending ended up being probably one of my favorite attendings I've ever worked with, and ended up being one of my letter writers. Even though I was the most incompetent medical student she had ever worked with on day one. So there was some shining light at the end of the very dark tunnel. But working through that rotation with her, she allowed me to do a lot of procedures, intubate, do lumbar punctures, do a lot of different things. And she was an incredible mentor. Just day one was rough. So Tyler, as we kind of get wrapping up this episode, I know we've talked about a lot of hard things and a lot of dark things. Just a couple last questions. And that would be, what would be some light that you saw throughout the dark month in the PICU?
The biggest thing that comes to mind is I've never been more affirmed of how strong kids are. Like, I feel like in all of the chaos, in all of the darkness, and all of the everyone losing their freaking minds over all these, like the ones that are actually suffering, man. I've always joked like why I couldn't do it adult care is because I think adults are too like childish, and I think kids are like the most adult things on this planet. like kids are just so strong, and I mean I really believe it. And there's so many moments where I mean some of these kids what they're going through, I could never imagine having that on my shoulders at 10 years old, 15 years old, and they're handling it like champs, man. Like they're just and that those are the reminders of like, man,
Yeah.
perspective. Like, yeah, is my life hard right now with the job that I literally signed up to do? Yeah, sure. They didn't choose this. They didn't choose any of this, and they are handling it so wonderfully. And it's not always the case, of course, but like when that happens, it's just beautiful to see. And to an extension from that, like the families of really like chronic kids, like you when you see strength come out. I mean, like Tommy, I know you've talked about like your own experiences as a father and dealing with child with more intensive medical needs, and I have so much respect for fathers like you, for families that like this is their normal. I talk about my new normal, but their new normal is, I mean, I literally went into a room, Tommy. I went into a room for this kid that kept desatting, and we're trying to figure out what's going on, and we're trying to get respiratory to come in, and mom is like eating a sandwich, and her kid's like desatting right next to her, and she goes, "Oh, hold on a second," and she changes out the trach and takes out the mucus plug and puts in a new trach, and I was like, I'm like vocering like RT, never mind, you're good, you don't need to come, and mom's just
Mama's
like,
got it.
mom's like,
Mama's
yeah,
got it.
yeah, she does this. And I was like, go off, mom.
Okay.
You just like,
Yep.
I think we need to charge you like for your service. Like this is great. Like, you know what I mean? So that would be the biggest light of all of this is like, there's beautiful resiliency in a lot of these families.
Yeah, I could not agree more. Children are so strong and so resilient. And then I think two last questions is how would your mindset or how has this rotation shaped your view of medicine as a whole?
Man, if I'm being honest, I think I'm still working out that answer, Tommy. But I will say it reaffirmed that I'm in the right field. And that like the things that I want to be able to prevent and seeing the things that weren't prevented, like even more reaffirmed of our role in preventative medicine. But it definitely gave me shape and perspective to see what matters and how quick life can change. And that in the chaos of all of this, knowing how to be there for a family in a dark moment, if we weren't there, Tommy, like I know people aren't really going into pediatrics the way that they used to, and we're already like underserved. I did think about like, man, how that was all horrible and beautiful. And if there were even less of us, like what really could have happened, how much worse it could have been. Man, I think for medicine looking forward, it's that I wish there's a way that I could get people to see what we saw. And for those that are interested in pediatric care to see like, man, the world really, really needs you right now.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Tyler, I thank you for being so vulnerable. Thank you for being so open and sharing your heart with us, your hardships, your maybe pitfalls. That's exactly what this podcast is about. So thank you so much for sharing your PICU experience with us. Do you have any last parting words of wisdom for people who may be going through a hard time?
I'll tell everybody what I told like the new residents coming on, taking my place, who have the wonderful scared eyes that I had when I started the month. Um, the two biggest things of taking away: one, nothing is about you. Nothing that is said to you from any provider, healthcare worker, when you are in a stressful setting and people talk in a certain way, they do not have the bandwidth to remember 15 minutes from now. So for the most part, I would say give everyone grace, especially those that maybe be speaking to you in a way that you would wish them not to, because I can assure you they aren't going to remember it as long as you may remember it. And when you remind yourself of that and know that none of this is about you and none of this is that serious when it comes to you, it does make all of that more manageable for being a cohesive team, and then, your own sanity. And then the number two thing that I will be taking away for the remainder of my entire career and life, Tommy, is that I will take working an hour later or 30 minutes later to take 30 minutes to an hour overall through the day, more time with patients selfishly, to recognize when I need that reminder of what we're here for, because that gets lost so fast. And I wish if I could pick you all over again, I would have started doing that sooner in the month. So for everyone who's getting ready for these tough rotations, lean on your co-residents. It ain't that serious when people are talking to you, because it's about them and not you. And when you are about to pull your hair out and cannot remember, what am I freaking doing? Like, what is the point of this? Take the extra time, go into a patient room, be there selfishly for yourself.
Amen. The bedside is where burnout burns out. Love that. Love that. Love that.
Love that.
Awesome. Well, Tyler, thank you so much for having us. And to all of our listeners, thank you so much for joining in and listening to We Are Human.
Everybody, you can find this episode and other episodes like this at the hippocraticcollective.com. That is the hippocratic-collective.com. Until next time, everybody, stay healthy, stay human. Thank you.